Ayun, don't run too far. Before the words had even left my mouth, the child had already wrenched free of Qinghe's hand. His little legs carried him over the threshold and toward the clump of banana trees beneath the corridor. I set down my teacup and rose, my skirt brushing against the embroidered stool. I had taken only 2 steps when a horse neighed from the mouth of the alley. Then came the sound of hooves. Close, frantic, drawing nearer and nearer. "Madam!" Qinghe rushed over and tugged at my sleeve. "The carriage." I had no time to answer. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ayun poke half his head out from behind the banana leaves. His little face was utterly expressionless as he stood there stiffly, staring at the chestnut horse thundering down the slope. The driver was hanging onto the reins with all his might, his voice already hoarse from shouting, "Move, move." I took half a step forward and reached out to pull Ayun back. He suddenly moved 2 steps to the right, as if something invisible had tugged at him, and came to rest firmly against the base of a corridor pillar. The horse's front hoof shattered the blue brick where he had been standing moments before. Fragments flew up and struck the tops of his shoes. He glanced down, then raised his face and opened his arms toward me. "Mother." I crouched down and held him, my palms slick with sweat. His or mine, I couldn't tell. Qinghe drew a sharp breath behind me and took a long moment to find his voice again. "Why, young master, how did you know to dodge to the right?" Ayun buried his face in the crook of my shoulder and said in a muffled voice, "I don't know. The horse came charging at you just now. Why didn't you run?" I loosened my hold on him slightly and looked into his eyes. He blinked twice, as if thinking, then finally shook his head. "I just felt that it wasn't safe to stand over there." Qinghe was about to ask more, but I called out to her, "Go give the coachman some silver to calm his nerves, and while you're at it, ask whose horse that was." She acknowledged me and left. I led Ayun back. The breeze beneath the corridor was cool, blowing against my back. The layer of sweat clinging to my inner garment turned icy and made me tense. I recognized that scene. When the horse charged over, Ayun had been standing on the left. I lunged over to shield him in my arms and dodged to the left. The carriage shaft scraped a long strip of flesh from my back, and he was thrown from my grasp, his forehead striking the sharp corner of the stone steps. "Right" was the last word he said before he lost consciousness. I held him in my arms, kneeling in the blood. At the time, I thought the pain had muddled him and that he could no longer tell left from right. But just now, he hadn't been muddled. He hadn't even hesitated. Later, Qinghe returned and said that the horse had just been brought in from the horse market in the south and had not yet been fully trained. The coachman had been newly hired by the outer court of the Duke of Qinghe's residence and had already been punished before the second young master, Qinghe. After hearing this, I asked no further questions, merely telling her to go to the kitchen and bring a bowl of calming soup. Ayun sat on the couch, fiddling with a 9-linked ring puzzle. His fingers were clumsy, and he could not undo even one ring after a long while. Growing frustrated, he tugged at it. I walked over and held down his hand. "What are you hurrying for?" He pursed his lips, the rims of his eyes slightly red, but he did not cry. I removed the first ring for him, and he immediately took it and continued working on it himself without looking up. I returned to my seat by the window and watched the last sliver of sunlight withdraw from the stone steps in the courtyard. The string inside me, taut all day, finally relaxed a little, but immediately tightened again. Ayun was right, you mustn't stand over there. He couldn't explain why, but he simply knew. In my previous life, it took me a full 3 years to vaguely trace the origins of the hidden connections within the household. By the time I understood, Wenyu had already been carried into the Zhao family in a bridal sedan. On a snowy day the following year, her so-called husband pulled a servant girl onto his lap right in front of her. She cried through the night, and the next day, 3 scratch marks had appeared on her face. When I hurried to the Zhao household to bring her back, she clutched my hand so tightly that her nails dug into my palm, without saying a word. She had been only 13 that year. All of this had happened after something befell Ayun. But now Ayun was sitting here safe and sound, solving the 9 linked rings puzzle. Then what about Wenyu? I raised my head and glanced outside. She had gone to visit her maternal grandmother today. Judging by the time, she should be back soon. At dusk, the courtyard gate sounded. Yunyu walked in, with her maid, Mingzhu, following behind carrying 2 bolts of new silk. She wore a smile, but when she saw Ayun asleep on the couch, she lowered her voice by 3 notches. Mother, grandmother gave us 2 bolts of cloud brocade, saying they're newly offered this year. She came closer, then suddenly stopped. Why is mother so pale? Nothing. A horse bolted at the entrance to the lane this afternoon and gave me a fright. Her brows immediately drew together. A bolting horse? Whose was it? What about Ayun? He's fine. I looked at her face. She was 13, and her features had not yet fully matured. Her jawline was soft, and when she smiled, a very faint dimple appeared on her left cheek. After she married into the Zhao family in my previous life, that dimple never appeared again. I suppressed the bitterness in my throat and changed the subject. Is grandmother well? She's doing well, and she even asked when father would be returning to the capital. She placed the brocade on the table and casually picked up one of the rings from the Chinese rings puzzle that Ayun had dropped. Mother, this ring seems to be in the wrong position. It shouldn't be threaded this way. I walked over to take a look. She moved the rings around twice with her fingers, switching the order of the 3rd and 4th rings, and the puzzle immediately came apart. Ayun turned over in her sleep and muttered something unintelligible. Yunyu did not ask anything more about what had happened to Ayun that afternoon. She merely straightened the 2 rings, then looked up and smiled at me. Mother, grandmother said that the old madam of the Zhao family is holding a birthday celebration on the 10th of next month. The invitation was sent to grandmother, and she asked whether mother would be going. The Zhao family. My heart sank, though I showed nothing on my face. What did your maternal grandmother say? Grandmother said to do as mother wished. But she did mention that the 2nd young master of the Zhao family is 14 this year and does well in his studies. When Yunyu said this, she was arranging the 2 bolts of cloud brocade, without turning her head, her tone perfectly even. But I noticed her hand pause for an instant on the satin before continuing to smooth it. The pause was very brief, so brief that I would never have noticed it if I hadn't been paying her my full attention. We needn't concern ourselves with how well the 2nd young master of the Zhao family studies. I picked up my teacup and took a sip. I'll personally visit your maternal grandmother tomorrow. We can discuss the invitation then. Yunyu acknowledged softly and did not reply. That night, I sat beneath the lamplight, my mind turning over and over only one matter. In my previous life, the invitation from the Zhao family had first been delivered to the Duke of Jinhua's residence. I had thought nothing of it then, assuming it was merely an ordinary social visit, and accepted. At the birthday banquet, Yunyu and the Zhao family's 2nd son exchanged a few words through a screen. The following month, the Zhao family came to propose marriage. Every link in the chain had begun with that invitation. But this time, the invitation had been delivered to my mother first. Someone was changing the course of events. I trimmed the lamp wick a little higher and watched the flame flicker. Few people in this household knew that my mother had an old connection with the Zhao family. Fewer still could accurately figure out how to deliver the invitation and deliberately bypass me to send it straight to my family home. I blew out the lamp and lay down. I had to go to my mother's tomorrow. I closed my eyes. Early the next morning, I went to my family home. The carriage stopped at the back alley. Qinghe held up the curtain, and just as I bent down to get out, I happened to see Nanny Zhang, who served at my mother's side, standing by the side gate with a letter clutched in her hand, about to go inside. Nanny Zhang. She turned around and, seeing me, visibly relaxed before hurrying over. Miss, you've come at just the right time. Old Madam was mentioning you only a moment ago. This is an invitation from the Zhao family. Old Madam told me to keep it safe and said she would have you read it yourself when you arrived. I did not take the letter, merely walking inside. Is Mother up? She is. She's having breakfast in the flower hall. The sandalwood incense burned heavily in the flower hall. When I entered, Mother was trimming a branch of white plum blossoms to place in a celadon vase. Seeing me, she paused with the scissors. You came so early. I heard about the startled horse yesterday. Yun wasn't hurt, was she? No, I dodged it in time. She nodded and did not press further, pushing the invitation toward me. An invitation from the Zhao family. Take a look. I picked up the invitation. It was written on gold-flecked paper and bore the Zhao family seal. The date was the 10th day of next month. It was exactly the same as in my previous life. In my previous life, I had agreed after seeing this very invitation and let Wenyu accompany me to the Zhao family's birthday banquet. I set the invitation down. What does Mother think of the Zhao family? Old Madame Zhao and I had some acquaintance when we were young. I've seen her second son twice. He has a decent appearance, and his scholarship is passable too. Mother lifted her teacup and took a sip. However, in terms of family status, the Zhao family still falls somewhat short of being a match for Wenyu. Then why did Mother bring the maidservant into the household? She set down her teacup and glanced at me, a faint trace of scrutiny in her eyes. Concubine Liu sent word through someone that the dowager lady of the Zhao family wants to meet Yinyu at the birthday banquet and asked what I thought. Lu Rao. I picked up the teacup in front of me and scraped the lid twice against its rim without taking a sip. In my previous life, this thread had been buried deeply. I did not learn that Concubine Liu and the second madam of the Zhao family were cousins until Yinyu married into the Zhao family. Using the Zhao matriarch's name, she pushed Yinyu into attending the banquet, where the Zhao family's second young master spoke a few words with Yinyu from behind a screen, and those few words ruined the rest of my daughter's life. Now she had even skipped that intermediary step and gone straight to my mother. How did Auntie Liu know that you and the Zhao family had known each other before? Mother said, oh, then continued, she came to pay her respects last month and casually asked about it. I said I had once dined with the old madam of the Zhao family in my younger days. She didn't say much at the time, but only sent a letter after all these days. Mother set down the scissors and wiped her hands with a handkerchief. I sensed something was wrong and was just about to send someone to fetch you so you could take a look. I did not respond, only asking, when you came by yesterday. Did she hear about the Zhao family? No, the invitation hadn't arrived yet. Mother pondered for a moment. Qinghe, just say what you have to say. We cannot attend the birthday banquet on the 10th of next month, Yunyu. Why? I closed the invitation and pushed it back toward her. The second branch's mistress of the Zhao family and Concubine Liu are related. Mother didn't know about this before, did you? Mother's expression changed abruptly. She had spent decades navigating the inner household. One sentence was enough for her to grasp the implications. Sure enough, after a moment of silence, she slowly set down her handkerchief. Concubine Liu's reach extends far enough. So she inquired about your past with the Zhao family for this very purpose. I rose to my feet. Mother, please decline the invitation on my behalf. Just say that Wenyu was unwell that day. Mother neither agreed nor disagreed, merely asking, in all the years Concubine Liu has been in the household, you've never mentioned anything about her before. I didn't mention her before because the time wasn't right. Mother glanced at me and asked no further questions. As they left her parents' home, Qinghe asked from inside the carriage, Madam, are you really not going to the Zhao family's birthday banquet on the 10th of next month? No. But the invitation was sent to the old madam. If word gets out that the eldest miss is unwell, Then let her truly be ill for once. Qinghe froze for a moment and said no more. I leaned against the carriage wall and closed my eyes. Whether the illness was real or feigned was unimportant. What mattered was that the trail leading to that post had been cut off, forcing Liu Rao to find another route. I could defend against her while she stayed in the shadows. Only when she made a move would I be able to see just how many lines she had laid. It was already afternoon by the time we returned to the residence. We ran into Wenyu, who was coming from the garden with Mingzhu. She was holding an embroidery hoop with a piece of plain silk stretched across it, several stitches of a pattern already worked into the fabric. When she saw me, she called out, "Mother," then held out the hoop. I couldn't sleep last night, so I sketched out the base design. Could you take a look and tell me if it's all right? I took it from her. It was a magnolia, its petals only 3 layers deep so far. The color of the topmost petal was wrong, it was a pale bluish green. Wenyu never used bluish green to embroider flowers. She thought it could not hold its own against satin. Why did you think of using jade green? I don't know. I was terribly sleepy last night, so I just picked up whatever thread came to hand. She lowered her head and glanced at it too, her brows knitting slightly. It is a little odd. If Mother says it's not good, I'll undo it and start over. No need to undo it. Jade green looks nice too. I handed the embroidery hoop back to her, my gaze falling on the topmost petal. During my previous life, in the 2nd year after when you married into the Zhao family, the Zhao family's 2nd son took a concubine. The jade-green magnolia embroidered on that concubine's close-fitting camisole was exactly like this. After seeing it, Wenyu cried all night. The next day, she moved to the rear annex to live alone. I had never mentioned this to anyone. There was no way she could have known. Yet when her hand touched that jade-green petal, her fingertip flinched. Daughter, I suddenly lost the desire to embroider this design halfway through. Something about it just feels wrong. She handed the embroidery hoop to Mingzhu. Put it away for now. We'll talk about it again in a couple of days. If it feels wrong, don't touch it, I said. Didn't you sleep well last night? I kept tossing and turning, having all sorts of jumbled dreams. I forgot them all when I woke up, only a flower stayed with me. She smiled and tugged me toward the room by my sleeve. Mother, what did grandmother say? Has the matter with the Zhao family been settled? You're not going. Your grandmother declined on your behalf. She paused mid-step. The pause was so brief that one could easily miss it if not paying attention. Yet the fingers clutching my sleeve loosened slightly before tightening again. She said nothing, only giving a soft mem. After dinner, I sent Qinghe to find out who from Aunt Lu's courtyard had left the residence recently. When Qinghe returned, she was carrying a lamp and spoke in a lowered voice. Bitao, the senior maidservant at Aunt Lu's side, left the residence once on the 20th of last month. She went to Sue's silk shop in the southern part of the city. I heard the shopkeeper's wife is the sister-in-law from the maternal family of second Mistress Zhao. Everything matched. I twisted the wick between my fingers without saying a word. During all the years Liu Rao had been in the residence, she had never openly fought or competed for anything. She was gentle toward Wenyu and Ayun as well, and would occasionally make 2 pairs of shoes by hand and send them over. Yet in my previous life, 1 pair of shoes she made caused Wenyu to slip on a flagstone in the garden, leaving a scar on her knee. At the time, I thought the shoes had simply been stitched too loosely. But looking back now, the patch of moss on the flagstone that happened to be slippery was precisely where Wenyu stepped. Who would have poured water there to cultivate moss? Madam, about Concubine Liu. Qinghe hesitated. Don't rush. I extinguished the lamp. She has just sent out a letter and has yet to hear a response. Once she does, there will naturally be a next step. I could never make sense of the jade-green magnolia embroidered on Wenyu's hoop today. if I alone remembered my previous life, then who had chosen the thread in her hands for her? But it was all right if I couldn't figure it out at the moment. The medicine was brought over on the evening of the third day. Qinghe took the bowl, set it on the table, and covered it with the lid. She came in and stood before me, lowering her voice to half its usual volume as she spoke. "Madam, son Posy from the kitchen says this bowl of pregnancy-stabilizing medicine was brought by a young maid from Concubine Liu's courtyard. She said Concubine Liu received half a gene of fine chuanchung 2 days ago and had a bowl brewed for madam while she was at it." I lowered my head and looked at my abdomen. This pregnancy had just reached 2 months, and when I first realized I was pregnant, my pulse had not yet revealed it. In my previous life, I also drank an anti-miscarriage potion this month. It was sent by Concubine Liu, who said it was an old family recipe brought from her maiden home, gentle and nourishing, without harming the body. I drank it for half a month, and then lost the baby. The physician said the Ligusticum had been used too heavily, depleting both my qi and blood and causing the miscarriage. At the time, Concubine Liu knelt in the courtyard and wept all night, saying she knew nothing of medicine and had meant well but done harm. Qinghe was not in the capital, and my mother-in-law did not pursue the matter. She merely reprimanded her a few times before letting it go. Now this bowl of medicine had come around once again. Ligusticum, exactly the same. Concubine Liu is thoughtful. I reached out and lifted the lid for a glance. The decoction was clear, and its medicinal scent was not particularly strong, but the distinctive pungency of the Ligusticum could not be concealed. "Qinghe, go ask Granny's son for a few angelica rootlets. The finer, the better." Qinghe answered and left. I carried the bowl of medicine to the windowsill and poured the decoction into the soil of the chrysanthemum pot beneath the window. The liquid seeped down quickly, leaving only a thin layer of brown on the surface. After the angelica rootlets were brought back, I scattered a few into the bottom of the bowl, rubbed a streak of the decoction along its rim, and set it back on the table. At that moment, Ian pushed the door open and came in, holding a piece of osmanthus cake with one bite taken out of it. He walked over to the table and stood on tiptoe to take a look at the bowl, wrinkling his nose. "Ma, this stinks." "All medicine stinks." He shook his head, brought the half-eaten osmanthus cake close to the rim of the bowl, then quickly pulled it back. "Stinky. Even stinkier than the last one." My heart tightened. "Last time? When did you smell medicine?" "When Uncle came last time, that auntie brought it." He tilted his head and thought for a moment. "Mother wasn't there then. She said it was stewed for Mother and told me not to touch it. I smelled it once. It stank much more than this." "Uncle." He meant Shenyanji, Shenli's half-brother. And the auntie he mentioned could only be Liu Rao. When had Shenyanji last come? I thought for a moment. It was probably half a month ago. At the time, I was pregnant, and Liu Rao brought over a bowl of soup. I wasn't in the room, so she set it down and left. Ayun must have smelled it then. I lowered my head and looked into his clean, clear eyes. A 4-year-old child didn't know what poison was. He only thought it smelled bad. In my previous life, during those 2 weeks of taking the medicine, had he smelled it in some unnoticed corner? "Mother, you can't drink this." He stuffed the osmanthus cake back into his mouth and said indistinctly, "It smells worse than that one." "I won't drink it." I pushed the bowl a little farther away and wiped the crumbs of pastry from the corner of his mouth with a handkerchief. "Good boy, Ayun. From now on, don't touch anything Auntie Liu brings you, not even smell it." He nodded, then shook his head. "I don't need to smell it. I can tell. That auntie smells bad too." As soon as he finished speaking, he ran out. Qinghe returned, still clutching the remaining half of the angelica root fibers. When she saw the empty bowl on the table, she froze for a moment. "Madam, you poured it all out?" "I did." "Sprinkle the fibers into the bottom of the bowl." If Concubine Liu asks tomorrow, say I drank half a bowl, found it too bitter, and poured out the rest. I covered the mouth of the bowl with a handkerchief. She put Ligusticum wallachii in the medicine in the same amount as in my previous life. Qinghe did not ask what past life meant. I had brought her with me from my mother's family home, and she knew that I occasionally had strange dreams these past 2 years, but she never pressed me about them. She merely nodded and placed the medicine bowl on the tray. That night, after I lay down, I turned over. Ian's words, "that auntie smells bad too," continued to linger in my ears. The foulness he spoke of was not a smell. I had smelled the scented powder and fine aloes wood on Liu Rao, and they were not at all pungent. Ian meant something else. But a 4-year-old child could not explain it, and there was no need for me to press him. It was enough that he knew to stay away. Sure enough, Auntie Liu came early the next morning. She wore a lotus-colored baisie and a silver hairpin. Before even crossing the threshold, she let out a laugh. "Sister, did you find yesterday's medicine agreeable?" The chuanqian was from the first harvest, so I was afraid I'd put in too much and reduced it by another 2 fin. I was reclining against a bolster, flipping through a book in my hands. At her words, I looked up and smiled. "You're kind to be concerned, sister." I drank more than half a bowl, but it was simply too bitter, so I poured out the rest. Her gaze swept over the table, and when she saw the few dangue roots at the bottom of the bowl, not a flicker of change crossed her face. "It is rather bitter, but it's good for the baby." As she spoke, she came 2 steps closer, her eyes naturally falling to my lower abdomen. "This pregnancy of yours looks more stable than the last one. You have much more color than before." "It is better than before, perhaps because I haven't been vomiting much." She smiled but said nothing more, instead changing the subject to the matter of making autumn clothes at the residence. I responded half-heartedly, while noting how many times her gaze had swept over the bowl of medicine since she entered the room, 3. Each time, she had done so as if unintentionally, but I remembered every one. After she left, Qinghe tidied the tabletop and said quietly, "Madam," when Concubine Liu was leaving, she paused at the door and glanced at the pot of chrysanthemums on the windowsill. The medicinal broth at the base of the chrysanthemums had already dried, leaving brown stains embedded in the surface of the soil. You had to crouch down and move close to see them clearly. She had been standing at least 5 paces away from the windowsill. "She could see it," I said. Qinghe's hand paused. "Then wouldn't she know?" "It's good that she knows I've collapsed. Only then will she come up with her next move." I closed the book and set it beside my pillow. She came today because she saw that my complexion hadn't changed. Most likely, that medicine never made it into my stomach. She'll have to think of a new way when she gets back. Sure enough, toward evening, Bitao brought over a plate of yam cakes, saying that Concubine Liu had steamed them herself for Madame to try. Qinghe was about to take them, but I stopped her. "Sister Liu has gone to such trouble, but I haven't had much of an appetite these past few days, and anything sweet makes me nauseous. Take them back and thank her for me. Tell her I appreciate the gesture. Leave the cakes there for now. I'll ask for them when I feel like eating them." Bitao left with the plate, looking embarrassed. Qinghe closed the door and came back, muttering, "First medicine, then cakes. Concubine Liu is being awfully impatient this time." Nothing can be rushed. I rubbed the edge of the quilt between my fingers. The Zhao family has already replied to the message. The letter she sent didn't reach where it was supposed to, so we need to steady things on my end quickly. Otherwise, none of what comes next will fall into place. Qinghe nodded as if she understood, though not entirely. "Then, madam, will you still take your medicine tomorrow?" "Yes." Soak some dangue in water and dilute it, leaving only the medicinal scent. Nothing else. Then, as for Concubine Liu, let her send a 3rd item. I closed my eyes. 3rd time's the charm. I rejected her gifts twice, so for the third time she'll have to use a more foolproof method. I'll wait for her to change tactics. Outside, the wind passed through the lantern paper beneath the corridor eaves, making a soft rustling sound. Aiyun called out mother from the next room, and Qinghe went over to answer her. I listened as that call of mother traveled through 2 doors, clear and bright as well water. In my previous life, after I miscarried, I lay on the couch for more than half a year, unable to get up. Aiyun had only just learned to walk then, and every day she had Qinghe help her shuffle over to my bedside, where she would stuff the leaves she had picked into my palm. I kept every one of those leaves. Later, when Wenyu married, she took some with her. The rest remained pressed beneath my pillow until the day I closed my eyes for good. Lu Rao's third offering was not food. It's silver. When Qinghe handed me the pawn ticket, the first autumn rain of the year was falling outside the window. The ticket was from a long-established pawn shop in the southern part of the city. The item pawned was a pair of gilt gold bracelets inlaid with kingfisher feathers, my bracelets. A date was written on the back, 3 days ago. Bitao, who served Madame Liu, had gone there. Madam, aren't these the same bracelets from your dowry? I remember you rewarded Qinghe with them last year. Before Qinghe returned to her hometown, she said she had handed them over to the accounting office for safekeeping. Qinghe's voice was so low it was almost inaudible. I just went to ask at the accounting office. They said that some time ago, Madame Liu was checking the household's old account books and found Qinghe's entry. She said the original records were unclear and needed to be re-examined, so the items were transferred to her courtyard for safekeeping. I sat beneath the lamplight, clutching the pawn ticket. One event after another from my previous life rose to the surface. Those bracelets had indeed been a reward I gave Qinghe. She was an old servant I had brought from my maiden family. In my previous life, after she returned to her hometown to visit her family, she never came back. I was busy caring for my weakened body after a miscarriage and did not investigate her whereabouts closely. Only later did I learn that she had contracted a sudden illness on the way home and died before she could arrive. At the time, I had merely thought it was bad luck. Now the pair of bracelets was back in Lu Rao's hands. Before Qinghe returned home, was the registration of the bracelets handled by the accountant? I asked. It was Manager Chen of the accounting office who handled them. He entered them into the register before handing them over to Qinghe. Is Manager Chen still working in the accounting office? Yes. During those few days when Auntie Liu was checking the underlying accounts, Steward Chen took 3 days leave, saying that his elderly mother at home had fallen ill. Taking leave. Lu Rao auditing the accounts. The bracelets being pawned. The pawn ticket. These 3 things formed a single chain. If any link in the middle were severed, the whole thing would no longer connect. I didn't know whether Qinghe had encountered a sudden illness on her journey home, but her bracelets were now in a pawn shop, the pawn ticket was in my hands, and Lu Rao should still have that underlying ledger in hers. If someone came to inspect my dowry one day, the bracelets' whereabouts unknown would be recorded in the ledger as my having pawned them privately, with no one knowing where they had gone. But Lu Rao would not have taken this step for no reason. She had met with one setback after another these past 2 days. She had failed to get me to drink the medicine and failed to get me to eat the pastries. Now that she had produced the pawn ticket, she meant to seize my vulnerability. What she did not know was that in my previous life, I did not learn what had become of these bracelets until after Xinli returned to the capital. By then, Qinghe was already dead, and the bracelets had not been recovered. Xinli had said, it's best not to let a pawn ticket like that remain out in the open, and Steward Chen was replaced soon afterward. At the time, I thought he simply did not want to invite trouble. Looking back now, after Steward Chen was replaced, no one ever examined the underlying ledger in Lu Rao's hands again. I lit a lamp and had Qinghe write down the date when Qinghe had returned to her hometown. The next day, I went back to my parents' home. My mother was in the courtyard watching people move flower pots. When she saw me, the first thing she asked was, "You know about the bracelets?" Mother's news came half a day earlier than what she had told me. She offered no further explanation, merely reaching into her sleeve and pulling out a piece of paper. Manager Chen's leave request from 3 days ago. I had someone make a copy. Take a look at the date. I took it from her. The date written on the leave request was the same day Bai Tao had gone to the pawn shop. Manager Chen took leave. Who was given the key to the accounting office? I asked. The young servant from Auntie Liu's courtyard. The keys have been handed over, but what about the accounts payable and receivable from the accounts office these past few days? Who's keeping track of them? Mother glanced at me. The accounts office hasn't kept any accounts these past few days. Auntie Liu said the underlying records were unclear and needed to be audited again, so all withdrawals have been suspended until the audit is finished. For now, all the household's expenses, large and small, are being recorded in the petty ledger at her residence, bypassing the main accounts office. By cutting off the accounts office, the copy of the underlying records in her hands had become the only version that counted. Whenever she brought out these bracelets to make an issue of them, I would be saddled with a reputation for privately pawning my dowry. In my previous life, Qinghe had suppressed the matter for me, but this time I could no longer wait for him to do it. She's making this move too hastily. I put away the note. She's in a hurry to seize control of the situation before Madame returns. The Madame Mother referred to as Qinghe's mother, the Dowager Lady of the Duke of Jinghua's household. This month, the Dowager Lady had gone to Guanyin Temple outside the city to pray and eat vegetarian food. She would be staying there for 21 days, and by the count of the days, she would return in 10 days. Lu Rao wanted to settle the matter before her return. With the Dowager Lady presiding over the household, it would not be so easy for her to make her moves. What are you planning to do? Mother asked. The pawn ticket is in my hands. I'll go redeem the bracelet tomorrow. Once you redeem it, she can still use the original accounts to make her case. You still won't be able to explain where the bracelet went. So the original ledgers have to be brought back too. I set down my teacup. The accounting office key is in the hands of a young servant, and that servant belongs to Auntie Liu. Steward Chen isn't here, and the accounts haven't been recorded these past few days. Whoever has the key can add things to the books. And if she can add things, naturally she can delete things as well. Mother looked at me without speaking. After a long while, she gave a slight nod. Early the next morning, I had Qinghe take the pawn ticket to redeem the bracelet, while I went to the accounting office. A young servant from Auntie Liu's courtyard was standing guard at the door. When he saw me approaching, he came forward a couple of steps, his face wreathed in smiles. First, Madam, Auntie Liu instructed us that the accounting office is sealed these days, and it wouldn't be appropriate for anyone to enter. I'm not going into the accounting office. I stopped beneath the veranda. I've come to look for something old. Before Qinghe returned to her hometown, she sent a letter saying that she had lost something on the way and asked me to help check the entry in the accounts. I only need to take a look at the register. The young servant hesitated. But the key is with Concubine Liu. I can't get it. Then go ask Concubine Liu to come here. I'll speak to her in person. The young servant ran off. Before long, Lu Rao arrived, still wearing the same lotus-colored jacket, a brass key pinched in her hand. When she saw me, she smiled first. Sister, what brings you to the accounting office? About Qinghe, those 2 bracelets of hers were entered in the old ledger for your courtyard, weren't they? I'd like to see her original entry, so no one can later claim that my things have an unclear provenance. Lu Rao's smile did not change, but her finger lightly scraped across the key, producing the faintest sound. She was silent for a moment before saying, I remember that pair of bracelets was listed in my courtyard ledger. If you'd like to see them, sister, shall I have someone retrieve them and send them to your room? No need to send them. I'll wait here and take a look. She had no way to say no. Several maids and matrons were standing at the accounting office door, and everyone passing by was watching. She unlocked the door and had a young servant bring out the old ledger. She flipped to Qinghe's page and handed it to me. I lowered my eyes and glanced at it. The page was spotless, and the line reading "a pair of gilt gold bracelets with kingfisher inlay" was still in the original handwriting, unchanged. She hadn't had time to add anything to the ledger yet. But the person who added the items had a key, and the person with the key was her. I closed the booklet and handed it back to her, smiling. "All right, I've looked through it. You're cleared." Then I turned and left. That evening, Qinghe redeemed the bracelet and, after wiping it clean, put it away in my trunk. Sitting beneath the lamplight, I ran my fingers over the small patch of green jade on its surface, knowing full well that Liu Rao would certainly be unable to sleep tonight. She was waiting for me to take the pair of bracelets to confront her, but not only did I refrain from seeking her out, I also retrieved the bracelets without a sound. The record in her hands had become useless paper, and the pawn ticket was gone too. Everything was as if it had never happened. But she still had the key. I blew out the lamp and lay down. As long as the key was there, she would keep opening that lock. The day she slipped something new into the ledger, I would be waiting for her at the door. Liu Rao waited for 3 days, but finally couldn't hold back any longer. Early on the 4th day, Bitao took a new ledger to the old madam's courtyard. Although the old madam was not at the residence, the old woman who attended to the courtyard daily was still there. Bitao said that while organizing the old accounts, Concubine Liu had discovered several discrepancies and wanted to report them to the old madam's courtyard to be recorded. The old woman accepted the ledger and said she would wait for the old madam to return before reviewing it. That booklet came from the old madam's courtyard, passed through one person's hands, and ended up on my desk. Qinghe opened it and pointed to a certain page. A new line had been added: 1 pair of gold bracelets adorned with kingfisher feathers, pawned by the first Madame Naxia on the 18th day of the 9th month. Pawn ticket no. Bingshan 73. Redemption date undetermined. The date recorded was the 18th day of the 9th month, the very day Qinghe went to redeem the bracelets. The date she added was the day they were redeemed, not the day they were pawned. "She doesn't know we've already taken the bracelets back," Qinghe said in a low voice. "She thinks they're still at the pawn shop. By adding a pawn date, when the old madam investigates, the pawn ticket will be in my possession, but the bracelets won't. How could I prove my innocence? But the pawn ticket has already been cancelled." I turned the page. Sure enough, beneath the date was another line in small characters, handled by Chen. It even bore Steward Chen's surname. But Steward Chen had taken leave that day and had not handled anything at all. Liu Rao had added this entry, unaware that in the pawnshop's master ledger, the record for redeeming that pair of bracelets read "redeemed with the original ticket." The pawn ticket had been cancelled on the spot, and the transaction had been settled in full. If she wanted to establish that the bracelets had been pawned, she first had to produce the pawn ticket as evidence. But she could produce neither the ticket nor the bracelets. All she had was a ledger she herself had altered. I closed the ledger and had Qinghe put it away. "Madam, shall we go to the old madam's courtyard and make everything clear now?" "We won't wait for the old madam to return." I rose. Since Concubine Liu has sent out this booklet, she must be waiting for the old madam's response. But with the old madam away, she no longer has anyone in the manor to corroborate her claims. She thought the booklet would reach the old madam first, but it fell into my hands instead. "Then we should go find the second young master," I said. "He's the only person in the manor who can make a decision right now." Shenyanji was reviewing official documents in the study. He set down his brush when he saw me enter. I spread the booklet open on his desk and turned to that page. He lowered his head and read it once, then furrowed his brows. "Sister-in-law, is this the account book?" Auntie Liu sent it to grandmother's courtyard, claiming that I had pawned my dowry in secret. I stood facing him without sitting down. "I have the pawnshop redemption stub." Those bracelets are now in my trunk. Qinghe redeemed them with the original ticket on the 18th of September, and the pawnshop ledger recorded the cancellation that same day. Auntie Liu wrote in the book that they were pawned on the 18th, but the pawnshop had no record of accepting a pledge that day, only a record of its redemption. Qinghe stared at that line for a moment, then tapped his finger on person in charge. Manager Qin took leave that day. I approved the note. The accounting room key was in the hands of a servant from her courtyard, and the account books were sealed for 3 days. No one entered a single transaction during those 3 days. How did she get this book? The key was in her hands, so naturally she was the one who added to the book. Qinghe put down the booklet and glanced at me. His gaze was somewhat different from usual, touched by a barely perceptible chill. Sister-in-law, what would you like me to do? There's no need to do anything. I closed the booklet. When Bitao took this booklet to the old madam's courtyard, Granny He from the old madam's courtyard was there too. Granny He recognizes Steward Chen's handwriting. His name was added to this booklet later, and the handwriting doesn't match. All I need to do is have Granny He repeat the matter exactly as it happened when the old madam returns. But before that, I'd like second uncle to step in and take back the account office keys. Qinghe asked no further questions and nodded. All right. I'll take care of it now. He rose and walked out. I stood in his study, gazing at the osmanthus tree beneath the veranda outside the window. Half its leaves had turned yellow, and they rustled down whenever the wind blew. In my previous life, Lu Rao had planted this osmanthus tree herself, saying it would bring good fortune to the second young master. Only now did I realize that he had never been the only person she was trying to please. Lu Rao moved far too hastily. She was so eager to settle everything before the old madam returned that she forgot the accounts office had been sealed for 3 days, and everyone knew the key was in her hands. She also forgot that the handwriting in the handler column of the ledger Bitao had delivered did not match Steward Chen's handwriting in the original accounts at all. She could add a date, but she could not fabricate an entire chain of custody. At dusk, Qinghe had someone return the key to the accounts office. When Qinghe took it, her hands were trembling slightly. Madam, the second young master has taken back the key. He said that starting today, the accounts office is to resume keeping accounts, and nothing from Concubine Liu's courtyard is to be entered into the books again. I acknowledged this and placed the key in the box. At dinner, Wenyu was holding her bowl when she suddenly looked up and asked, Mother, did Concubine Liu break something in the courtyard this evening? I heard the sound of porcelain shattering. Perhaps my hand slipped. Wenyu glanced at me and didn't ask any further. She lowered her head and shoveled rice into her mouth, while Ayun gnawed on a chicken leg beside her, his face gleaming with grease. I looked at the two of them and drank the last mouthful of soup from my bowl. The accountant's keys are back, the pawn ticket has been cancelled, and the bracelet is in my trunk. The day after the ledger in Lu Rao's hands was sent out, Qinghe intercepted it and brought it back. What else does she have? The Zhao family's trail has gone cold. The medicine never made it down. She didn't manage to hold on to the bracelet either. All she has left is a ledger written in the wrong handwriting, and the old madam will be back in 6 days. After dinner, I walked through the garden and ran into Lu Rao. She stood beneath the osmanthus tree, her shadow stretched long by the corridor lanterns. When she saw me, a smile still tugged at the corners of her lips, but it faded by the time it reached her eyes. Elder sister, what a clever move. I didn't stop, but said as I walked on, little sister's handwriting in the booklet is fine too. It's just that Steward Chen's handwriting doesn't look like that. There was no reply from behind. The day the old madam returned to the residence was clear and sunny. Concubine Liu knelt in the center of the flower hall, the ledger spread open before her. Bitao huddled in a corner, her face as pale as paper. The old madam sat in the seat of honor, Qinghe stood to her left, and I sat on an embroidered stool to her right, not holding any tea, simply watching in silence. You say Qinghe pawned her dowry. Where are the pawn tickets? The old madam's voice was not loud, yet every word was steady, like a nail driven into the earth. Concubine Liu lifted her face slightly. The pawn tickets are in madam's hands. She has the pawn ticket in her hands, so is she the pledger or the redeemer? Auntie Liu froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Qinghe spoke up beside her. Mother, I had someone copy the pawnshop's ledger. There was no record of a pledge being accepted on the 18th of September, only a redemption, and it was the original ticket being redeemed, with the silver and goods fully settled. This booklet of Auntie Liu's says pledged on the 18th of September, but the person who handled it, Manager Chen, wasn't even at the residence that day. I approved his leave slip. She hadn't even had the keys in her hands for long before she hurried to add it to the accounts. The old madam turned to that page in the booklet, looked at it for a moment, then raised her eyes to Auntie Liu. You've been in this household all these years. I've always believed I treated you fairly. Auntie Liu prostrated herself, pressing her forehead to the floor. Her shoulders and back trembled, but she couldn't utter a word. The old madam asked no more questions. She merely waved her hand. Send her back to her own courtyard. Take back the keys, have the number of servants in the courtyard, and don't let her leave without my permission. She paused. Dig up that osmanthus tree, too. I don't like looking at it. Two older maids came forward and dragged Madame Liu out. Bitao followed behind, crying, her footsteps scattering all the way. Wenyu stood beneath the corridor, watching from afar without saying a word, then turned and went back inside. That evening, Wenyu came and sat by my bed, still clutching the embroidery hoop. The jade-green magnolia had been taken apart and replaced with a pomegranate blossom. Mother, I took out that pattern. Good that it's been taken apart. I reached out and pressed down the newly embroidered pomegranate blossom. The stitches were tight, and the colors vivid. I won't embroider with that color anymore. She smiled after saying this, rose, and left. I blew out the lamp and lay down. From next door came unsteady sounds of turning over, as though she were resting her head on the sound of water. That osmanthus tree was gone first thing the next morning. The story has come to an end. Thank you all for your companionship. See you in the next one.